not bode well for the Republicans going to 2024.
It does not. You know, some people have described it as the dog catching the car. They got what they wished for with Roe being overturned, and their promise with that was they would take it to the states and they would ban abortion. Well, now we know that that is not good politics. And as you mentioned, we saw these women senators in two key states stand up. In South Carolina, the third time since Dobbs that they tried to push through an outright ban on abortion, and conservative pro-life women standing up in the Senate and saying enough is enough to the gentleman in the Senate, and saying, one of the quotes said something like, "We can control ourselves. We are fine. Stop." And so this is where Republicans are at this point, and it's going to follow them right into the 2024 contest as they try to figure out how to message on this. And I think Nancy Mace at the federal level has been a great example for them, but they don't seem to be following her down that path.
So we're not talking about two blue states here, obviously, Rick, far from. And following what we saw in Kansas, even Wisconsin, following what we saw in the midterms, if you're advising a candidate running for national office in the next year here, what is the message when you put all of these signs together?
I think that the message for any national candidate is going to have to derive from where they're coming from, right? So Governor DeSantis has an initiative for a 6-week abortion ban in Florida, and it would be very hard for him to walk away from that, even though that is a little bit outside the mainstream of even Republican primary voters. And what we see with the example of South Carolina and North Carolina is that abortion terms are not monolithic within the GOP, right? A lot of the GOP has different views on, what the terms of a appropriate abortion law, especially at the state level, should be. And we've even seen the debate in the United States Senate about whether or not you would have a national law that would override all those things. And even though Lindsey Graham represents a view that maybe you have a national law that evens out the abortion rules state by state, a lot of Republicans believe that that would be a disaster politically and would just as soon allow these states to do their own thing and decide. And so I think it's going to be very difficult. You're going to have a debate with maybe half a dozen Republican primary candidates where every one of them has a different take on abortion, and voters are going to have a very difficult time discerning where you fit into their construct on this.
Yeah, because the general election, they're going to have to try to move a little bit more to the center if they want to pick up votes from suburban women and independents. This is going to be a huge issue going to 2024. Also, it was just this week that we know who the Democratic nominee is likely going to be, and that's Joe Biden. And this weekend, Joe, of course, you and I will be there. He will be speaking at the Correspondents' Dinner.
Yes.
Potentially a bank will be in receivership, and also he has an American journalist abroad. His family, Evan Gershowitz's parents are going to be there. It's going to be difficult.
It's always a real test at this event when you're supposed to be telling jokes and you've got the real world spinning around you.
Jeannie, just with Biden this weekend, speaking to a room full of journalists and others, it's going to be a different lens people place on him. He's now a candidate.
That's right. And we're already hearing some of what he may be roasted about. But of course, with all, as you mentioned, these events swirling around, it's going to be a bit more somber, perhaps, than in other years, I think, particularly given the Wall Street Journal reporter. And of course, as you mentioned, the fact that Joe Biden has just announced his intention to seek another term. So it's going to be a great event. I think you and Joe will have a great time in rainy D.C., and I can't wait to hear how it is.
Thanks so much, Rick Davis and Jeannie Sheehan Zaino, for joining us, our closers this Friday, as we still await what happens with FDIC this Friday evening.
Said it could be a newsy weekend. Say hi to us at the dinner and check out the new Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online.
Mixed signals from the economy, from earnings, but not from President Biden. This is Bloomberg Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston. This week, special contributor Larry Summers on whether we're headed for a recession after all.
The odds on that happening sometime in the next 12 months, I think, are pretty good, perhaps 70%.
Former IBM head Sam Palmisano on next steps for generative AI.
Business leaders and companies can show the way. They could establish the guardrail.
And Steve Ratner of Willett Advisors on how to invest in China.
On the plus side, I would say China's back. The flip side of it is that clearly they're a bit off balance.
Global Wall Street spent the week poring over a lot of data, looking for a signal in all of that noise. Big tech earnings surprised to the upside.
They have had such large gains in this sector, not even the sector as a whole, but these FANG names.
But most of the talk was about artificial intelligence and what it could mean for the tech industry, and for that matter, for us all.
AI is bigger than any single company or any single industry or indeed any single country.
And after all those encouraging earnings last week from the big banks, we learned just how bad things had gotten for Credit Suisse before UBS came to the rescue.
In 3 to 4 years' time, I like to see the employees of the combined organization
organization, this country, our clients to be very proud to be associated with UBS.
And then, at the very end of the week, reports came that the FDIC will put First Republic Bancorp into receivership, saying the time had run out for a private solution. President Biden was unambiguous in telling us that indeed he would like another 4 years in the White House.
Let's finish this job. There's nothing we cannot do if we do it together.
And economic numbers pointed in both directions, with home prices and sales up.
If housing comes back, does that give the consumer another boost?